through these introductions. Lenora Olson, who is here in the Department of Pediatrics at the University of Utah. Aka Parek, who is with the Family Justice Program. Asha Parek, with the Family Justice Program. You are a licensed clinical social worker. And Moises Prospero, here at the Utah Criminal Justice System. You've already met him. And Martha Burkett, licensed clinical social worker. And I think we should open it up, starting with you guys, to practical implications of what we're learning here.
Sure.
Take it away, Mo. You've been here for 3 days almost, so you start, and then we'll take it from there.
Thanks. I know. Actually, this is somewhat difficult, and it's one of the things that I myself have kind of put myself in the position of being more of a translational kind of researcher, of looking at this type of research and saying, as a researcher in social work, what is it that I could take away and be able to provide this type of information for the community, and for the community to say, okay, we can use this. And so sometimes it's pretty difficult. Sometimes like, how am I ever going to, especially like yesterday, which was a much more further away from the domestic violence piece. But still, there's a lot of policy implications that I was thinking, a lot of the macro parts. Today, I could actually see maybe there's something we could do with direct practice, working individually with people. Like today, one of the talks was talking about forgiveness. And it just so happens that one of my colleagues there at the College of Social Work, he just did a meta-analysis on forgiveness and how that was actually very helpful towards for the victim. So the victim of domestic violence, to be able to forgive, increased satisfaction in life. I think it was also less health problems as well, and there's another dependent variable too. And so those types of things is like, oh wow! And so today they were talking about forgiveness and how is it that we can actually reach that. Another one was anger. In domestic violence, there's a lot of issues around this anger management programs, and there's a lot of what do you guys think? Skepticism on whether these programs actually work, or is it just something to be able to sentence a perpetrator of abuse to go do some anger management training. We don't really care if it works. It's just something that you have to do and pay for financially and time and so forth. But some of the presentations actually is like, oh, maybe if we look at it in this manner where when we get angry, we're actually are giving you a signal, and not just that I am angry, but of some type of strength or something that's going to happen. And so the other person is receiving that, saying, uh-oh, you are trying to power over me now. And so that should start telling me something, and whether I am going to now do the facials too and provide that towards you too, or am I going to back off? And so that interaction is, can we develop certain anger management programs that really look at those steps, at that development of that process, rather than just say no to anger. Be a happy guy. Yeah? And don't self-medicate either. And so those are the kind of things, if we start breaking into the process of some of these evolutionary processes to be able to develop some of these programs. I actually I want to look at a couple of the PowerPoints because I made some notes. So if some of y'all can take it away from that.
I was an undergraduate in anthropology many years ago, so I think I went back 20 years and I got lost in what it was like to be 20 again and be an undergraduate and having a good time to being today in today's world, trying to bridge research and practice. So I felt heartened that some things were still being discussed and I could remember what they were and think about them. But I also felt some disappointment because I feel like maybe we haven't come as far as we would like to have come. So I was giving that some thought. But when I heard all of the talks today, which were great, and I really enjoyed it, I started thinking that maybe what underlies a lot of this, whether we're going to look at cortisol and how that affects a child's later development in their later life, or power and control and sexual jealousy, or step-parents and how they treat their children or non-children, is what do families and society needs to be successful? And sometimes it doesn't matter whether it's a step-parent or not. All families and all of us need certain social supports. And that's really, I think, what I kept coming back to when I was thinking about it. And it really hit me when people presented data from maybe Sweden and other places that appear to have a better handle on that than maybe our country. And so I think for me what came through is all of this is important. There is some evolutionary underlying hypothesis themes that happen, but really when you think about bringing it into the real world and what we need, I think social support and help for everybody to be successful would alleviate a lot of what we've talked about today.
I would say for me, this was a totally different world than what I, live and work in every day. But I think the piece that I was struck by, what I wanted to hear more about, are what are the sort of successful cases, or what are the things that are working, and how can we as practitioners take those pieces and really apply them to the things that we're working in. And then I would say that the other, I kept thinking, like I left at lunchtime, I thought about how, I work I used to work at a domestic violence shelter, and I work for the YWCA, which has a domestic violence shelter. Every day we hear these stories from women that are so cruel and painful in terms of the kinds of abuse that they're experiencing. And not to say that victims of domestic violence or women who are victims of domestic violence are somehow so angelic that their behavior is not also, that there aren't bad things that they also do. But it's really hard to sit in a room where people are sort of saying, well, how much of it is what the women are doing, or how much of it is of their behavior, are they responsible for? And it's hard when you hear those actual stories and when you see the level of control that they have lived through and the fear that women experience as a result of domestic violence. It's really hard to relate or to kind of stay on that intellectual level and debate that issue. The numbers, for example. I think there is a debate for sure about how many men are, how much abuse is mutual, or how abusive are women as well. And I think that there's definitely a place for that. But the reality that we see every day is that, there are so many women who are so abused and so controlled. And what are we doing to help change that in society?
I work primarily with aggressors and do treatment with them. And so some of the things that I paid attention to were what are maybe some of the biological or anthropological reasons for that kind of aggression in their families. And so I was thinking, what are the things that I can take back to treatment? What are things that maybe I haven't looked at before? Maybe their diet, maybe where they come from. And some of the validation that I heard was focusing on empathy and relationship building and how to deal with stressors. Those are things that we work on already, and I was really glad to hear that you guys had hit on those too. That means that we must be all moving in the right direction, or we're all deluded, but I'll go with A. So it was really nice to see that bridge between the two of us, and it was a good time. Thanks for having us.
I'm probably going to get some of these terminologies wrong. But for sure, today he's talking about the effect of alloparental support. That was, I think, one of the main things that shot out, thinking about, especially as a social worker, working towards macro, meso level approaches, changing policies, changing some of the systems that influence our behavior. And what I really like is y'all didn't say it, but it's basically a strengths-based approach, at looking at what is it that we're doing right? And so when it was looking at the cross-cultural aspects of step-parents and the discrimination that they have towards their towards their stepchildren, why is it that some nations have it less than others, right? Just like spanking, why do some spank more than others? And so looking at it is, then what is it that this one country or countries are doing, and being able to do that investigation and be able to hopefully generalize it towards practice and say, maybe this is what we need to do. This was really important. My wife, she works with a refugee community, and a researcher came in to look at, which is the common theme to do with certain populations, specifically minority populations, to use deficit modeling and to go look at all the issues, all the problems that these minority cultures supposed to have. And that this is the way she came in, and so she was looking for attachment disorders among this group, and she couldn't find them. And for me, when I was hearing these results, I'm thinking, wow, what must this refugee community, especially ones that just came from the Burmese, they're called Karen, they've been in there for 30 years, living in a refugee camp. What is it that they are doing that somehow are developing some type of protective factors to be to fight off some of these mental health issues, some of these social issues? That for me was the next question. For her, the researcher, it was, I must have not done something right, because they have to have issues, right? And I was like, no. And then lastly, mentorship. Although I do work with domestic violence, another part of it is gang violence as well. And just some of the literature always talked about, and the practitioners always talk about having that one important person in your life, irrelevant whether they're a parent or irrelevant if we're actually related by blood. It's that special person that somehow taught you, or for some reason you respect, and therefore you're able to carry on pro-social behaviors.
I'm just so glad, Moises, that you brought up that point about alloparents, because something I worry about so much from the kind of research that actually we're talking about a lot here is that we are reifying this concept of genetic relatedness in a way that not all traditional societies share. I think Martin and Margot are exactly right that there is this discriminative parental investment, and we do prefer close kin or those we've been familiar to from birth to others. But not all cultures has this same legacy of our lineal tradition. And I'm reminded by your comments about the refugee community of this wonderful quote. It was from one of the early anthropologists studying the Naskapi people in the Arctic region, in northern North America. And it was a conversation between a Jesuit missionary who was taking this old man to task for the promiscuous behavior of this community where nobody knows whose father is who, and my God, you people have to stop this. And the old man says to the missionary, he says, my child, you French people, all you care about are your children. We care for all our children. And it was a remarkable convergence of two cultures with very, very different views about descent and child care. And I think that this is really one of the peculiarities of an ape that also happens to have evolved as a cooperative breeder. And we're really different in these respects. What should we do now? Should we continue to talk or open it up for... I think we should open it up. There's got to be people out there.
There's somebody that spoke yesterday, I can't find my notes, that talked about non-human primates. Somebody spoke about non-human primates there was two methods of within this group of, I don't know if they're chimps or bonobos, that they were able to separate them. Sometails? But this one was about the controller. There was a controller, and it usually was a male. What's that? Oh yeah, Franz. Oh, yeah. I don't know if you would be able to talk a little bit about how that may be able to be generalized in some type of practice. Because what I was thinking, that one, and then one where there was fathers and youth, and when there was a time of stability, fathers were able to control youth, but times of instability, there would be too many youth, and they just weren't able to control, and there would be some more warfare going on. And I was kind of putting those two together, like, I wonder if when there's a sustainable power, a controller, and a controller doesn't have to just be that one individual, but a group that can actually provide pro-social rules. Would you have any comment on anything like that, or attempt to?
Yeah, I think to have an authority figure who promotes harmony in a community, obviously that's going to be beneficial, as opposed to someone who terrorizes everybody. The only parallel that I always think of when I think of domestic abuse situations is that in primates we make a distinction between dominant styles. And so there's some species, actually the stump-tail rhesus comparison is one of dominant style. The rhesus monkeys have a strict despotic style where the dominant is absolutely dominant and punishes any transgression. And the stump-tail has a much more tolerant, cohesive, friendly style. And the theories that are out there in biology about why some animals have one style versus another style have to do with what you could call exit opportunities. And that's relevant, I think, for domestic abuse, is that if you have an exit opportunity, if you are, let's say, a species where individuals can easily transfer between groups, then the dominants have to be nice, because if you are my subordinate and I need your cooperation in a group, because that's why I live in a group, and you are free to travel anywhere and join other groups, I better be nice to you, otherwise you leave. If you have no exit opportunity, let's say we have strictly... we have intergroup conflicts and groups don't get along very well and you're stuck in my group, I can exploit you at impunity. And I do think that that's a very relevant model for domestic abuse, because it will depend on where you can go if you're in trouble. That determines how the other party is going to treat you, the one who has more power, physical power.
I guess you were talking about it as a family unit.
Yeah.
So if I'm the victim, if I have somewhere where to go, then the abuser or potential abuser may likely not be as mean.
Because the abuser needs you. Mm-hmm. The abuser, in order to have a family, needs you.
Especially if there's food involved, I think somebody said earlier, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and so if you have a place to go and say, well, bye-bye, and I'll come back when you've calmed down, that's a very different situation than when you have no exit opportunities.
Because I know that's one of the issues that we do talk in domestic violence, that when they ask, why does she stay? Mm-hmm. Why doesn't she just leave? Mm-hmm. It's because, well, she doesn't have an option. And it could be financial, it could be social, or it could be totally cultural, where you don't have an option. You will not leave because that is, you will be socially ostracized from within our culture. But how about at a higher level? Instead of at the family unit, how about at a community or municipal unit? Like, because I'm thinking, do we really want the police to be that controller? Do we want criminal justice or that system to be that controller? And as a Latino that was raised in El Barrio, which it was poverty-stricken, we had nowhere to go. And the police did treat us punitively. And so therefore we had a terrible, and we still do have a terrible, even as an academic, I see a police officer, I don't get, yay, a policeman, my friend. I was like, oh, here he is going to stop me now. And so I'm trying to think, what kind of a unit, larger unit at a macro level can we develop that can be this controller, but that is not punitive? That's kind of my big one.
But that's why I think that we do need to know what supports every family needs or every community needs to be successful, so we don't turn to criminal justice and other punitive ones. But I think that's where we have come to, and that's where our money goes to. So.
You mean the criminal justice?
Yeah, versus giving support to families that need it, so they could be successful. Anyone else, Asha?
I'm thinking as a a person that's a director of a criminal justice center, I don't want you to take away the money from the criminal justice center. I think there was a question or a comment back there.
I was going to ask whether you who work in the community could tell me whether the abuser doesn't have an exit opportunity. Do these abusing men feel trapped in their relationship?
I'll take that one. A lot of times when we're in therapy, we're talking to where did this come from, what happened, what's the story behind this, and a lot of aggressive people say, I felt trapped or I felt cornered, either if that's by their circumstances or by the other person in the relationship. And I would say that we need more research on that, but it is definitely a common theme.
It might be also, depending on what kind of child abuse you're talking about, and I'm assuming that mostly we're talking about physical child abuse here because we've been talking about aggression, but if you think of sexual abuse or emotional abuse, those have different patterns and different reasons. So it might not be that someone's cornered for sexual abuse. It might be power and control, that they have power and control over this younger person and have groomed them and wanted them to stay around, and then neglect might be a different issue also. So I think we need to think when we talk about child abuse, the different types of child abuse also, and not lump them together probably.
I'll just say one thing. One thing that we do know from abusers who have been incarcerated as a result of murdering their spouses is that it was a really small study that looked at this population, and they reported that they didn't want their partner to be with anybody else. Like they wanted to, they felt like they were losing this person. So if I can't have her, nobody else can. So it's interesting that if they were trapped, they were actually, here's an opportunity where you will be untrapped.
If they left.
Right. And they don't take advantage of that. And also, the risk for victims goes up when they try to leave an abusive relationship. So I think it's all about how you perceive what being trapped is. And it's that this relationship means something in their heads about, something about that person that isn't real.
Related to this and related to exit opportunities, I don't know how many people know about a study that I've always thought was very remarkable by Angela Brown and Kirk Williams, in which they tried to ask the question, what impact have domestic shelter services had on spousal homicide in the United States? And because you can treat the different states as units in a statistical analysis, you can get some leverage with that kind of question. Spousal homicide rates have declined quite a lot and fairly continuously, both female victimization and especially male victimization over the last 20 or 30 years in the U.S. And what Angela and Kirk found, and I believe the same result has been replicated more recently by Laura Dugan and collaborators, is that more shelter services protects men. And what it protects them from is being killed by trapped wives. That is to say, if a woman can, women who kill their husbands in retaliation or in self-defense, that's what seems to drop when more shelter services are available. Substantially more than any impact on the killing of wives.
Without we're talking about the domestic situation, with reference to gangs, it seems to me that what happened in Papua New Guinea might be useful here in that most of those communities have the reaction you were talking about, Moses, about the police. But if you created a council of elders, of men, older men in the community, and asked them to get involved when there were incidents of gang violence, their ability to talk to the gang members and get them to listen would probably be up by a factor of 10 times relative to the police. and it apparently was fairly effective in Papua New Guinea in reducing the number of wars, and also, as I understood from the talk, reducing the violence that occurred in the wars if they got involved. And we have the same technology that they were using, cell phones, which, by the way, are used by gang members regularly for all sorts of ways to avoid the police. And that might be an interesting model to try it out someplace and see if that doesn't help diffuse some of the violence by the young men.
It's interesting because we're kind of thinking about doing something like that in domestic violence, actually. And, of course, you said older men. I'm like, what does older mean? Us 21-year-olds, or and we are. We call it basically the ally movement, men's allies for women, to address men's violence against women, and to get older, more experienced men to become kind of a mentor role model in general. But that would be probably very nice when it comes to gang intervention with specific communities, with men that they know and respect, and that are culturally appropriate too. Because I know straight out, if when I was young and a white guy came and told me, "Don't be fighting," like, what the hell do you know? You know, it's just another white dude just telling us brown people what to do again. Screw off. Mm-hmm. And if anything, I leave more angry. And so as long as we're culturally appropriate, which on that note, real quick, I have to say this, as a social worker that believes in using research to address social injustice, is that one of the things that we notice right away, the few of us that are a minority group here, that there's very few minorities in the last couple of days. And it's a common trend that I see in the international conferences that I go. So it's not just this one for sure, or even this discipline. I don't know what we can do, but we really need to promote having these different cultures bringing their stories. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's beautiful to see stories of New Guinea, but if people from that culture themselves can help bringing that story to us, because, boy, that lens sure makes a big difference. And it really can make us take what is being researched, the findings, and make them much more applicable and culturally appropriate to that community. I mean, that really helps. And I didn't realize how much it helped until, as a researcher, the youth that I work with are like, wow, finally, un Chicano that can actually go to school, no way, you know? And so, you know, they have their own internalized oppression as well. And so, so please, if there's anything that y'all can do to provide funds to bring them to these professional conferences, that'd be great. But thanks for your input. That sounds kind of like on what we were thinking about. Thank you. What else?
Malcolm Potts, step back there. How are we going to get through this?
She's bringing. She's gone.
Engaged in a very interesting experiment where it's going to unemploy huge numbers of people, change the sort of social background in which people are working. So I have two questions. Is there any kind of research that people should be launching now to try and understand that better? And are there any very labor-intensive ways of ameliorating the problems we're talking about that we could put into the stimulus package?
They call Barack real quick. Wow.
I'm going to open that one up. You going to take it?
No. I was gonna volunteer Lenora.
I was about to volunteer Asha.
I can say that there is some one-time VAWA and VOCA money in the stimulus package that's specifically for domestic violence services. So somebody was already advocating for that.
And I was thinking when Martin mentioned that about domestic homicides are going down, and many people in my field are saying, I wonder if we're going to start seeing them going up with this change in the economics, and that we've had pretty good economic prosperity, and some people attribute it partly to that too. So there's a lot of interest in looking at homicides in the next 10 years.
Actually, Malcolm, since you've been working for so long on issues that are close to my heart, I know if you ask that question, you actually have some ideas. Can't we hear them?
Exactly.
No, I'm not sure I do. I mean, the one thing I noticed, Sarah, in one of your diagrams, that when you were looking at large families from the Leiden things, that the large families also tend to have abused children. And probably the burden of human suffering from those large families is greater than the burden of human suffering from the adopted children, etc. Or not the adopted, but the step-parents.
I worried about those, but I had the feeling that there was an ethnic element there, because there's so many immigrants in the Netherlands now, and so you would have to control for, ideal family size in that. I don't know. What did you make of that large family size correlation with child abuse in the Netherlands?
It has been found before in the child abuse literature, but I don't know how robust it is.
Right.
So, I mean, my interest is in family planning, which is not labour-intensive and is very low cost. And I would simply, at the present moment, when families are going to be suffering more, try to make it even more easy to get access to contraception and safe abortion. But it's not going to employ many people, unfortunately. Mm-hmm. So I was thinking more of sort of counselling things or working, with giving people why don't we advocate longer maternity leave, because we want to reduce pay loads in a lot of places. So let's say that if you work for General Motors, now you'll get 6 months maternity leave at half the rate of pay. That would save money and not unemploy people, and it would improve parenting.
And that goes
paternity leave. Mm-hmm. Yes, grandmother leave.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
No grandmother leave. I can't afford that.
No mother-in-laws allowed.
Just a commentary on that. Since I moved to Arkansas from Long Island, it's the culture shock was strong. But when I hear people say, "What can we do about this?" and you hear people say, "Well, we need to." There are these correlations with access to family planning. Mm-hmm. There are correlations with access to economic stability. That we need to work with communities. To develop strong community ties and give young people things to do and develop social networks. You go to Arkansas, my kids have abstinence-only education. They're not taught about anything. They're not allowed. My son was pulled out of a class for simply asking a question. I have never heard anything on the public except railing against all of these issues. We need to put more people in jail, right? That's what the thing is. We need to stop these social programs because they're taking our money. Abortion is evil. In family planning, it's all about liberals trying to put a one-world socialist government in your home. Mm-hmm. And so if you want to solve these problems, it's not just coming up with solutions, but also coming up with how to deal with what I would consider, at least where I live, a relentless and pervasive culture and atmosphere of marketing against virtually everything talked about here. I mean, you really have to get through that. The message itself, even if you come up with a solution, has to be put out. And the difficulty in this is extreme, at least where I live, and I suspect that it's pervasive throughout the country to different degrees.
Not going to talk about Utah, are you?
I'm originally from Texas, and now I live in Utah. And next I'm going to Arkansas.
Please come.
Well, actually, I was stationed in Kentucky, so I was close by. Yes. When I think about, because part of our center, the purpose is to influence policy through research. So some of the research that we do out in the community with the criminal and juvenile justice services that are out there, we evaluate them, and then based on these evaluations, we present it to the Congress, different committees. And that is basically what our biggest barrier is the attitudes towards some of these programs. So, and it isn't, I don't think it is just Utah. And it happened to me in Texas, and I doubt it's just in these 3 states either. And to be able to change those attitudes, that they'll be more accepting of that. But I don't know. I mean, I really can see this as a very, very long term.
How much of this cross-cultural stuff actually is really the culture that's not necessarily just fostering it, but actually preventing these solutions from being implemented?
I think in social work they teach us to start where the client is, and so I think we really need to get into those cultures and ask those cultures specifically, you've got a problem, how are we going to solve it? And help them come up with some ideas that are maybe not offensive to them. And I'm confident that people can come up with solutions to their own problems. I see it a lot. We just have to be careful not to try and impose our belief systems onto them, because you will get that whole digging in the heels and that kind of thing. But yeah, definitely we have to start where they are and kind of help people move forward to solve their own problems.
Alana, do you have something? Go ahead. Oh, she had something. She had herself first and then Mark. No, go on, Alana.
Oh my goodness, we couldn't just negotiate, which is what I was going to talk about. I think what's very interesting, and I'm just jumping in and trying to catch the tail end of this because I've been up working with the legislature today, specifically on some of these issues that deal with conflicting moral beliefs and values and how they impact our health and safety and the education of our children and all of these issues, and recognizing that if we want to advance the healthcare models and objectives that we have in mind and the safety measures that we have in mind, that we're not going to be able to do it without bringing in folks who come from different backgrounds, who may have opposing theories and opposing ideas. And what has been really beneficial for me is exploring those conflicts and differences within the camps of the people who we may share some larger beliefs, but we even still have differences about how we're going to get there. And then seeing how we can employ those strategies as well to work with people that seem to be on the other side of the divide. And what I've seen most recently that just is really, to me, the only thing that I've seen that actually works is finding the commonalities, finding what the common values are, and identifying with people on that, and having genuine respect for people regardless of how different their beliefs are. It's been a real challenge because we have some of the most tolerant people that I know. We have a couple legislators right now, because of their own intolerance, are really making other people's reactions to them are just full of anger and very powerful anger that has been elicited. And so it's interesting to examine our own reactions to the people that hold a different belief, that we're angry that they aren't being compassionate, and yet we can't have any sort of perspective in which to work with them. And so some pretty amazing things are happening there right now, though, where we've really bridged some divides and found, so say the folks who are really strong on lobbying against abortion, and we're really strong on lobbying against availability of emergency contraception for rape victims. And so everyone said that's never going to fly here. We have an incredibly conservative legislature. But we worked with the personal relationships with each of those people to be able to tell them, show them really, and we're not like hoodwinking them, show them how this measure helps them achieve the kind of world they want to live in as well. So that's one point, but then the other really quick one is the other thing that is really tough is you have to identify what about those belief systems that keep people from engaging in maybe progressive or more healthful behaviors. What about those belief systems are really have a psychologically protective factor for them, and if they abandon them, then they are very psychologically unsafe. And we see that a lot with responses to sexual violence and domestic violence. If we believe that only certain people who engage in certain behaviors are vulnerable to that, then we can feel that our community is going to be safe if we just hold these values. So I think we also have to identify how can we make people feel safe as we take away some of the things that may have kept them safe so far. So we have to start building alternatives for them as well. So I appreciate you guys giving.
Give a real quick comment on that. In exactly that, in trying to develop different interventions based on the research. Even at the very beginning, like right now, we're looking at a gang assessment throughout the whole state, and some of these communities think that there is no gang problem in their community, and it is happening. But to bring the different parties involved at the very beginning of that research process. And so I'm reaching out to both the liberal and the conservative legislators so they can be part of this process. So like that, when the findings come out, they can't just say, oh, it's you damn liberal academics out there pushing your Obama package, you know, so from the very beginning, I'm trying to bring them in because there is a lot of commonality, and so if we could bring them in the research process together and bring those questions that they have, their perceptions of interventions, and try to work it all together. That's where we're at. I think there's a question.
Hi, I just wanted to suggest that in these hard economic times, as has occurred throughout our history and everywhere around the world, people sort of rally to help each other in communities, and they get locally organized to make the best of their situation. Examples all over the world. And so this could be a time where you could have grassroots movements of people doing things like helping as if they were extended kin or as if they were male leaders. And then if you have good examples of this, and in this online age, this kind of thing could be advertised. If they show impact of the public embracing these kinds of things and positive benefits, the legislature will follow because they follow the votes. And so you can change attitude by changing the behavior. So if you had some good examples of communities, and I'm sure this is happening right now in different places, and to help people get mobilized to do this better, it could be a good time in spite of this bad time.
What a fabulous place to end the session on.
Yeah.
Thank you, Margot. Thank you. It's 4:30, so we're going to have our closing remarks.
Hello, everyone. My name is Bill Wirthlin. I'm the president of the Leakey Foundation. And I have to say, this has been a marvelous conference. And to the Tanner family, specifically to you, Barbara, thank you for the gift that you provide, which is not just the generosity of philanthropy that you give to this community, but to the world as a whole, because this focus on nonviolent human rights advocacy is something that people can really grasp on and hold and look at and think about and potentially come up with solutions. And for you to, and your center and the people that have selected the topic today, to pick a topic that's really a science topic, understanding evolution, how it fits in the world of psychology, how it fits with the intersection of a community in criminal, violent issues that we're dealing with in every community across the world, going to the very beginning and to the very core, to the molecular cause of what this is all about, which is dealing with the biological roots, and evolution is the beginning point. Everything else is dealing with symptoms. So thank you for providing this opportunity for scientists to convene. When Kristen Hawkes told me a year ago that this conference was going to be held, and she showed me the list of scientists that were going to be convened, I thought, this is going to be a fantastic, marvelous opportunity, because these are truly the all-stars of science that are here today. And for those of you that aren't part of that are part of the Utah community, that aren't familiar with science, I hope you take my word for it. These people are the people that have dedicated their lives to do the tedious research to come up with what I think is the information that is in an intersection of knowledge that we all have to know to become better, to harmonize the world. So, anyway, a little bit about the Leakey Foundation, because some of you may not know who we are. The Leakey Foundation just celebrated its 40th anniversary last year. I have been on the board for 20 years. I'm not a scientist. I'll confess right up front, I'm a business person. I grew up here in Utah and spent 8 years at the University of Utah working in business and law. And then I started businesses, became an entrepreneur, where I grew businesses, managed people, built teams, and solved problems to create enterprises. And ultimately, 5 years ago, I sold those businesses and always felt like there was an opportunity for me to come back to science, because science truly is a passion that I have. Not just anthropology, because if you think about the mysteries of the universe and nature itself, there's a big, broad horizon out there of science that we can all be interested in. Some of you may know or be interested in anthropology like I am specifically, and this may be the first time for some of you to even think about anthropology as it connects with human behavior. But it's all part of one big process of trying to learn the truth and trying to understand how we can become better as a species by understanding more. And the Leakey Foundation is right in the sweet spot of what that very issue is. And I'm proud to be part of this foundation. It was founded by a paleoanthropologist, Louis Leakey, 40 years ago. And he was a person who had a vision. He was not just a good scientist. He was a person who lived in Africa all of his life and had a vision that the cradle of mankind really was in Africa. At the time when he started his research, there was a strong belief by the majority of scientists dealing in that field that it was in Asia. And he found a fossil that is the iconic fossil of East Africa called Zinjanthropus, now genus Paranthropus. It was a wonderful fossil because it captured the imagination of the public. It was front cover of the National Geographic, and people flocked to hear his lectures across the world because we had this skull that had this big jaw, these big molars, and trying to understand, could that be one of our ancestors? Could that be part of what they were at that time thinking about, the missing link, the one or the two or the three in a line? Well, that was the imagination that that people had, and Louis was a superb speaker. I know because I happened to be a 14-year-old in an audience like this at Kingsbury Hall when Louis came to talk about this fabulous fossil, the Nutcracker Man. And it was the equivalent of having a lecturer come from behind the lectern and sit down with you and talk to you about what I have found. He had this ineffable quality to link science to an understandable level and take you there to Africa and feel the mystery. So Louis was a special person, and he was a person that not only with research, but just with the story that he brought to the public regarding science. So we've been around for 40 years. We continue to fund science, even though there's a economic maelstrom outside. We are not going to lose any of our funding cycles. We fund between $600,000 to $800,000 in research a year, and we also have a program where we provide 6 to 8 lectures across the United States. By the way, one of the locations is in Chicago, and based on the early Daly and Martin research, we're going to be a little more careful in that environment. So if any of you have an opportunity for wherever you live, including Salt Lake, to see one of the lectures, we try to have very interesting speakers on timely topics that will fill an audience, and we've been doing that. But Lewis's vision, beyond just finding fossils, it was to think that we have to go beyond academic barriers to understand the beginnings of humankind. And so he crafted, when he formed the Leakey Foundation, he crafted this very simple yet elegant mission statement. And for those of you that are business people, and there are trustees that are in this audience of the Leakey Foundation that have traveled to be here, that are business people that help us and guide the Leakey Foundation, when you create a mission statement as a business person for the beginning of a company, it's a very sacred spiritual experience. You have to sit and think about what is it that this organization is going to do, because this is going to be the guiding light for everyone that's on that organization. And so one simple sentence where he created, and this is Lewis's creation, to increase scientific knowledge, understanding, and it's increase scientific knowledge, education, and public understanding of science, human origins, evolution, behavior, and, most importantly, survival. The last word has always been intriguing to me. When and how can the Leakey Foundation help in enhancing the survival of humankind? When would we have the maturity of a 40-year anniversary, beyond the 40-year anniversary, to really focus on this intersection where science and humanity dwell? And perhaps, just perhaps, this conference may be the prototype of the type of scientific research and academic discussion and public interface that we could have right here. This is the prototype right here in Salt Lake City that we have. So, unfortunately, this is a non-recurring event as far as a conference with the Tanner Center, but that's a challenge to you scientists and perhaps to some of the trustees of the Leakey Foundation. What do we need to do to continue to carry the football down the field? So that's a topic. But I want to talk a little bit, just briefly, before I conclude, that because I am a business person, I like to speak to scientists as a business person. Anthropology it's not a forgotten science. It's a sector of science that seems to be a little bit subordinated to other sectors of science. And I don't understand why, for a number of reasons. Because even though there are difficulties in the environment of anthropology, and we'll talk just briefly about those, I think there's a business plan that could be contrived and executed that would work well with anthropology. But first you need to understand the environment that you dwell in. And the environment is the Gallup polls last week in the Economist magazine showed that this year, or last year, if they took a poll of citizens in the United States, 15% of those people polled believed that human evolution is relevant and real. 50% believe that evolution is part of the process of science, but only 15%. So if you go to Iceland, the number goes to 90%. Now, is there a correlation to why Iceland has the lowest homicide rate? I don't know. That'd be a good thing to research. Is it enlightenment? I don't know. But there are countries, and there is process, and there is understanding that's occurring. And part of it may be right here in this audience today and yesterday, that really anthropology and biology have an impact on who I am. So there are a lot of other collateral benefits for the research that we do. I had the opportunity to visit, after 20 years of meeting a very special person, Richard Wrangham, in Kabali, in his research center last July with my family. And it's a holistic approach. It's not just going out and gathering data in the forest. It's mixing and working with the communities. His wife, Elizabeth Ross, is right now raising money from potential donors over in Uganda to help the community schools. When you see the community schools and you see the education and the desire that these young kids have to have a better opportunity in life with more education, you become more committed as a person to say there is good being done, not just with the science that's being done in the forest, but the communities that surround it. The ecotourism. Ecotourism is creating a healthy environment also. It's adding money to the community, more stability, but most importantly, it protects the habitat where these beautiful primates dwell. So there's lots of collateral benefits that occur when we fund research in these research centers. And there's a book that I'm going to plug for you, Richard, Science and Conservation in African Forests, written by both Richard and Elizabeth. If you want to dig in to understand the direct benefits of what it means to have research centers in Africa, this is a great resource, and I would recommend it. So, back to the science of business before I step down. Lewis said, I would regard it as a waste of my time to study the past, and in doing so, I could not help guide the future. And he had this vision 40 years ago that what we will learn will help us as a species, will help humankind. And that's my hope. The business plan would look something like this. First of all, we're going to understand that it's a difficult environment when you only have 15% that may even believe what you're talking about is real. That has to be increased. How do we do that? With more education. More Leakey Foundation type foundations need to take on the responsibility. Academics need to think of ways to spread the education into middle schools and elementary schools. We're doing that in a small scale, but perhaps there's ways to do it in a large scale, on a volunteer basis, or even with public money. There are some options. How about trying to understand that even though this is a gloomy topic, it's a topic that does need to be addressed. So the recurring controversy of, when you say controversy of religion and evolution, I would suggest to the scientists that we deal with that believe that this is an important cudgel to bear, cease fire. Doesn't need to happen because the public doesn't want to see it, and we don't need to have that in science, my opinion. And there's lots of other reasons to think about why that shouldn't be. So are there other successful business models out there that we could model after? Well, next week or 2 weeks from now, we'll be launching a probe to Mars that cost a mere $458 million. Last week, we lost a satellite that went in the ocean for $280 million that was going to be monitoring global warming. Now, if I were going to put a menu in front of me and say, what's the most impactful science that's going to help me as a human being on this planet? And I look at, and not to say that that isn't a fascinating, wonderful function to understand the universe, but if I'm going to say this world of aggression, the constant culture of violence that we see even here in the United States and across the world, science as it relates to global warming, which certainly has some impact. If I pick a menu, I'm going to move anthropology and evolution to the top because we can fix this problem. Because I'm a businessman, it intrigues me to find out a way to really create a business model that will work, that will have something that will show, and not just the world that there's something to learn, but something that will have a direct change in how we live. And understanding violence and aggression, as we have with this conference, are first steps, and they're wonderful steps. And I would encourage next steps after this. And I appreciate the opportunity to be here at this conference. I've learned so much, and most importantly, it's given me a reason to to be able to mix and talk to a number of scientists that I don't that often get to speak with and talk about their theories and their ideas. As a businessman, I'm really curious about what the next research is going to discover and what the next paper is going to be about. So I have this curiosity, and I want to be able to help in return. And the Leakey Foundation is one of those vehicles where, for those of you out in the audience, if you're interested in knowing more about the foundation, it's a vehicle to progress knowledge and to help humankind in ways that connect with science. So anyway, I wanted to, again, congratulate George and the Tanner family for a fabulous conference and for the opportunity to have our trustees at the Leakey Foundation be here today. And I look forward to working with you, hopefully in the future, with some of these issues and trying to pursue this into a linear horizon somewhere with groups like this. So thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. I'll just ask for 2 minutes of your time before Dean Steve Ott brings these sessions and festivities to a close. All of us are delighted with the quality and variety of the papers and presentations, the incisiveness of the questions, the liveliness and thoughtfulness of discussions. We've heard lots of healthy, and I'll say functional, disagreements. But still at the closing of the event, no evidence of violence or even other kinds of punishment, not even much aggression loosely defined. I want to thank, again, the Tanners, Dean Steve Ott, all of our distinguished guests, our many co-sponsors on campus that are listed in your brochure. Especially want to thank Bill and Lisa Wirthlin and the Leakey Foundation from the community. Our community representatives for their wonderful observations from the front lines of dealing with these problems. People that have worked in university communications that you haven't even met, especially Lee Siegel, who's an expert in science journalism. People from food services, technical support from IMS on campus. Our constant companion, Steve Leach, with his camera. And especially my colleagues and other members of the staff, Alita Tu and Victoria Medina, who have just worked incredibly on this conference from start to finish. And also to thank again Elizabeth, Dave, and Steve for bringing forth this vision of the conference, which we've now really seen come to fruition. So please take a moment with me and thank everyone for everything that they've done. As Bill alluded to, these discussions will be ongoing, and that for us is one of the most exciting things about these conferences. Even though the topics rotate, from terrorism to migration to the evolution of aggression, and next year, sexuality, sexual behavior, and human rights. But these are not one-shot events, and that's part of the beauty of it, besides the bridge between academic discourse and public and practical issues. So with that, I want to thank you all again for your attendance and your support and your feedback to us, and turn things over to Dean Steve Ott, who will bring it to a close.
If you think George was short, you should hear me. This was truly wonderful. In terms of cutting new ground, I hope also, and I'm talking particularly to the speakers, the paper presenters, that you have found new colleagues to work with, stimulated new ideas of research, and as always, hope that involves our faculty, our graduate students here at the University of Utah, and also know that you're always welcome back. But to me, first, Elizabeth, Dave, Steve, where are you? Would you stand up? Again, I know you're tired of getting accolades, but And I would also like to ask every one of you who presented a paper, sat on a panel, or presented a poster, would you please rise? We have all learned so much, and as a dean, I think one of the most important lessons I'm walking away from this with is that I need to introduce some of my colleagues to the bonobos. So have a wonderful time. We will see you again soon. Publish.